Okay, here we're another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. A really special presentation for you guys from the brand Elka Watch Company. They're a Swiss-made brand founded just as recently as 2022, with the name actually being a nod to the old Dutch brand Elka Watch and Clock Co. Amsterdam that ran from 1877 up until around the quartz crisis of the 1970s. Now, in terms of the type of watch that these fall underneath, I would consider these everyday dress watches. Some key comp characteristics. In design language, we're looking at something that can fall within this space. Of course, you're going to want that elegant watch with a versatile kind of style that you can use for, daily wear, but also something that can be fully dressed up for more formal engagements. This is from their Ace Jewelers limited edition diversity series, and essentially Ace Jewelers and Elka Watch Company, this whole series is the result of a friendship between the two brands, personal friendships, which I think is great. The collection consists of 4 watches, each using a different type of numeral on the dial. The watches are powered by the La Joux-Perret G100, which is a self-winding movement with a power reserve of about 68 hours, which is nice and extended compared to your typical ETA variation. Also, production for each version is actually limited to just 25 pieces. Now, in terms of those dial variations, there is an Arabic dial, a Hindi/Eastern Arabic, as well as a Chinese. You guys can see here, those are the particular models that we do have. And yeah, I'm really excited to share these with you. These actually go for €1,705, including VAT from acejewelers.com, and I think they are very interesting and very, very handsome pieces. So big shout out to Ace for lending these press loaners in. Now, with all that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so we'll get a bit into the specs here to start things off. So you have a 40.8 millimeter diameter, so just under 41 millimeters, 11.2 millimeters thick, and that is including that beautiful, proud domed crystal, box domed at that. It has a 46.4 millimeter lug to lug, all stainless steel, with a mixture of brushed and polished finishes that are executed to an extremely high level. And you can see these are limited to just 25 pieces each, and they are featured on this beautiful 20 millimeter cognac colored suede strap with a 2 millimeter taper down to about 18 millimeters at this nice, highly polished and signed pin buckle, which is also fully milled here. You guys can see. So very, very nice. And of course, these are review models, so they're not going to be in the most perfect, like new, pristine condition. But I have to say, man, I'm very impressed. Well, I'm just starting with this more standard Arabic model. Definitely gives it the more sporty tone in terms of kind of everyday. You could see this swapped out onto a NATO strap, almost fulfilling a bit of a military kind of more industrial aesthetic. These beautiful blue dials are very, very handsome. They have that gradient sunray blue. Everything's printed. The hands are brushed, as you guys can see, which is going to offer a nice amount of contrast at various viewing angles. And then the seconds hand is nicely white, which goes with all the white indexing there for the seconds and sub-seconds. So very, very cool. And again, although you can't see it, there's a screw down case back, and the movement that I'm sorry that you can't see is the LJP or La Joux-Perret G100 68-hour power reserve, 4 hertz sweep, 28,800 vibration per hour beat rate. Very, very nice. So a lot to like here. But let's get into some of the more fun options, right? So out of these, I would say, of course, I think the most probably ornate and, visually impactful is going to be the Chinese lettering. Check that out. I should say new numbering, but man, that is just gorgeous. You just don't see this on a lot of different watches, and I think very smartly, even though this is a larger watch, right, at about 41 millimeters or slightly under. With that outer track, it does push things more centralized. Also, the numerals on the index are quite bold, and they're meant to be, right? So this is going to prevent it from feeling squished, crowded, or unlegible. You can see at the size here, you're getting nice legibility in between each piece. So even, of course, if you don't know, like myself, and you don't know a lot of different languages or a lot of different numerals, of course you can still, what 12, 6, 3, 6, 9, and you can do the math, right? You can figure out just by looking. This is no different than if there were baton indices, right? Those aren't necessarily representing numbers, but from the orientation what time it is. So I think that's really cool. And for those of you that might be overthinking this and thinking, well, if I don't know how to read Chinese, this wouldn't be a good look for me. Hey, I think it could be very, very cool. And again, even with the size, these are quite thin, guys. Beautifully thin, beautifully shaped, wonderfully proportioned. Look at that. There's just a lot to enjoy. Signed push-pull crown. You're also going to get 3 bar or 30 meters of water resistance, which is probably what you should expect for any type of, dress watch. So very, very cool. But let's move to kind of my favorite of the bunch, which is going to be the Eastern Arabic dial. So this one is very, very cool. It's very dynamic, and honestly, in terms of feeling like a clock face or a watch face, I think out of the different texts, this one really pops. It really fits, and it feels still quite like a time-telling instrument and not just dressed up. And then, of course, there's those collectible dials with Arabic numerals, and yeah, this kind of falls within that space. It is very collectible out of 25 units. And it's just beautiful, guys. I just love that. And honestly, it's quite intuitive when you look at the numbering, right? In terms of, a dot, and a dot being, right, the 12. And then, for 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, it's just laid out in a really cool way. I remember learning these numerals when I was deployed for the Marine Corps, and having to read various license plates and everything like that. If we were working, a patrol or, a security at a drop arm, stuff like that. So I don't know. I just think that for me, this is something that's kind of fun. So if maybe you're part of the same generation as me and you serve some time out overseas in the Middle East, something like this type of dial is very, very cool. And of course, fits within the whole diversity series, right? You're getting something, remembering a fond memory, from days gone by there, and just, learning a new skill. And of course, these are still all Swiss watches, Swiss made, and they're just going to be built really, really well and just executed beautifully, guys. Look again, just how wonderfully, magically thin these pieces are. I'm very, very impressed. What's your pick of the bunch here? Yeah, for me, this gradient blue works as a wonderful backdrop across all of them, but the Eastern Arabic numerals just look really, really cool to me. The one other thing to mention is that the lume, although as far as I could tell, it's unspecified, it does glow green, so we'll definitely take a look at that here in a few. But let's actually get these pieces on wrist and see how they wear. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, really, really wears well. Look at how flat that lays. It just contours to the wrist really well. And again, it is quite bold. It is quite dynamic. And for a dress watch, it is a bit more large. I would say more in the range of feeling full-sized versus oversized, and mostly because of how well thought out the ergonomics are in terms of the K-shape, the very short stubby lugs, that really do swoop down and wrap around the wrist. Also, I think proportionally it looks great, especially considering it does have that 20 millimeter lug width, which is going to make it very, very versatile for a lot of different wear profiles. Of course, if I did have my wrist a bit too close to the lens there, it's going to give you some perspective distortion. It's going to seem much larger. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low here, and now you're going to see it just sits actually quite well centered on my larger 7.5-inch wrist. And of course, this is a bit of a round wrist, so it's not like it's really flat and just accommodates larger watches really well. I'm somebody that does have to pay attention to the proportions and, you know, the ultimate lug widths and everything like that as well, and the case shapes. But I think this thing just looks really great. And again, this is probably the clearest, most crisp. If you really just want that ultimate legibility, you're probably going to want to go with something like this. But of course, there are some other models that can be a little bit more fun, a little bit more exciting available. And one of the beauties is that these straps are quick release. So one of the nice things is we can pop them off and pop them right onto another watch. So let's go ahead and do that. And pardon, I'm sure there'll be some fingerprints and some smudging from me handling it like this. So let me just give me a second and give it a quick wipe off camera so that I can get it back in front of the camera to showcase for you guys in terms of just how nice these are. Just give that strap a little wipe, dust off too. Cool. Check that out. Really handsome, guys. I'm digging this a lot. Now again, out of the options here on the desk, this one definitely is going to feel just a hair busy by comparison. But the nice thing is, if you do want something that's probably, in terms of visual weight, this one will feel the smallest because it has the dial that's taken up with the most, I think, because of the font that they're using and the typeface. It's going to feel a little bit more full and a little bit more proportional in terms of the sizing. Also bordering busy though, so that's one thing to keep in mind. But if you do have a very large wrist, this could be the option for you. Or if you have a very small wrist, I think, you know, there's a play with how dynamic and large the numerals are, but at the same time, it's going to be filling that space of the dial a little bit more and kind of drawing your eye closer to the center. And of course, with that gradient kind of fume style, that's another thing that was really smart for, you know, Elka and ultimately Ace Jewelers in terms of planning the layout of this piece. I think that looks really, really great. But, you know, why don't we get this on now to my favorite kind of dial of the group with that Eastern Arabic flavor, which I think is just very, very cool. And again, it's going to give you a little bit of the best of both worlds because it is still quite legible and crisp. Let me give it a quick wipe here, while also at the same time still giving you something quite stylish and unique, right? You don't always get that, you know, from both ends. A lot of times you kind of have to choose one or the other in terms of what you end up with. We'll give it a quick little dust off there. Yeah, check that out. Very, very cool. Okay, check that out, guys. I'm digging that a whole lot. Look at how beautifully flat it lays. The dial spacing is still very nice, very, very legible in terms of, again, your cardinal referencing. You don't have to know the numerals or the language to be able to tell what time it is, in the same way that you don't need that, you know, on a, let's say, a Rolex Explorer dial with just the 3, 6, and the 9, or a Submariner dial with triangles and, you know, rectangles and circles. So, again, don't overthink this. Don't talk yourself out of it. You know, hey, I'm here to help talk you guys into exciting things, not out of them. So yeah, I don't know. This one is just really cool. Again, it does share that limited nature, which I think is awesome. But with that said, let's actually get these off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you can see, really nice. And again, these aren't field watches, they're not dive watches, they're not even sports watches, so any bit of lume is going to be a lot of fun. But it is nice to see that these are going to be quite legible within these kind of lower light conditions. But one thing I always like to work in is, of course, a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, guys. And they do transition really well. Again, the day lume on here is always going to be nice, white, and crisp. And then as you get into the darker sections, you're going to see that green kind of show its face. And these, what a face it is to show. Even if I get into some harsh lighting conditions, which typically could expose any types of production defects, all you're going to notice here, of course, is probably a couple of fingerprints, maybe a couple of pieces of dust that are more on the crystal than they are on the dial, because these are, just impeccably finished, guys. I'm just, they are putting on a show, and I'm here for it. Look at that. That blue dial, so dynamic, so dark and deep, but then you have just those little rays of that bright electric blue, and then you get those tones of the midnight, tones of a very dark kind of navy, almost black tones, and that again just really helps with keeping these somewhat sedate in a lot of different lighting conditions. I know that can be kind of an issue with blue dials sometimes, where they can just be too vibrant, too out there, especially if you're somebody that doesn't really dress very loud, right? You don't necessarily want to have something that is even louder on your wrist if you're more into the kind of sedate and understated style. I think these really straddle the line there, where you're going to be getting a lot of dynamic play, but it's not all the time, right? So you can actually still enjoy these watches, on a little bit of a simpler level as well. Man, these aren't, I'm just wanting to stay in this low light transition because these just look so darn good. All right, guys. So closing thoughts for me on the wrist. These wear surprisingly well. Again, I definitely am more of a 38.5 millimeter kind of guy for a non-sports watch. But yeah, I have to say that these are just really well balanced in both visual weight as well as physical heft distribution. They wrap around the wrist physically well. And they do mitigate their size and their, potential, risk of feeling oversized really well by just the way that they wrap. And of course, the balance they are with that outer, minute track sub-seconds. It just looks really, really good. So in terms of model variations, there's various standard production options available from Elka Watch Co. in general. Of course, the diversity line is something that's special. So for comparable models, it's tough because I've just recently found myself appreciating the dress watch space more and more as of late. And these models have really won me over. They're definitely continuing that trend where I'm just like kind of wanting to give dressier watches more of a chance. And I know these used to be the everyday watch of choice, when the world was dressing a little bit more buttoned up, right? In terms of casual wear. So yeah, I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of return to a lot of those more vintage styles and just clean, timeless aesthetics. And I think these are a really great example of that. Very desirable, very, very handsome. Bottom line for me, guys, these may be super niche, but they're also super nice. This combination of style and substance make for pieces that would really be a welcome addition in most any watch collection, especially for those who value originality and personality over big brand logos. And I know that's a lot of my viewers that are, they're not necessarily into the hype. They're not into, what's really popular in terms of the mainstream crowd. And, they're looking for something that is just going to be a little bit more purposeful, a little bit more deliberate in terms of something that you're choosing to put on your wrist. So yeah, I think these are definitely up there. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please leave a like. And if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.